If you're watching this on Moodle or floated by on YouTube, a very warm welcome. My name is Rory Lees Oakes, and in this presentation we're going to look at an introduction to attachment theory part 2. This has been generated by request and a dialogue that I've had on the channel with, I'm guessing, a learner or a student who asked me to expand on the presentation I've already done, and pointed out that there may be some gaps in it. So I've had a reflection, and on reflection I've decided to expand the information just so there's no gaps and it's more accessible. And feedback's a great thing. It's how we learn. So I'm thankful for the feedback. So we're going to look at John Bowlby initially. He was born in 1907 in London, and he died in Scotland in 1990. His nationality was British. His field was psychiatry. He was influenced by Sigmund Freud, Melanie Klein and Konrad Lorenz. Freud, I'm sure you've heard of. Sigmund Freud. Melanie Klein was a huge writer and researcher and psychotherapist in childhood studies, and Lorenz was the researcher and scientist who got the ducks to follow him. He convinced baby ducks that he was the mother, and they followed him and believed he was the mother. He coined the term attachment, and his key idea was attachment theory. So his key idea was how we as children babies attach to our parents. So what is attachment? Well, Bowlby shared the psychoanalytic view that early experiences in childhood have an important influence on development and behaviour in later life. Basically, that subconsciously how we attach to our parents will influence on how we make our way in the world when we're coming to have relationships with other people, being able to love and form relationships not only with other people but ourselves. Our early attachment styles are established in childhood through the infant caregiver relationship. How we attach is generated by how we are parented. Bowlby believed that attachment had a basis in evolution. He wrote, "The propensity to make a strong emotional bonds to particular individuals is a basic component of human nature." And the picture on the right is of AJ and Julie. Julie's a friend of mine, and as you can see, Julie is bonding and loving AJ, making him feel loved and secure in his world, and there he looks very happy, very content, and I'm sure that Pete, who took the picture, he too will be giving love and attention to AJ, so the little fella will feel loved, wanted and cared for in his world, and more to the point, safe. Safety is the key thing here, because anything that's not safe will cause anxiety. And Bowlby believed that this was evolutionary. He thought it was hardwired into the brain. So the characteristics of attachment are secure base, proximity maintenance, safe haven, and finally separation distress. And I'll just go through those and just explain a little bit more about them. Proximity maintenance is the desire to be near the caregiver the child's attached to. So you can see little children, toddlers, they'll follow their parents around, not wanting to lose sight of them, and that's because they have a desire to be near the caregiver. Safe haven, returning to attachment figure for comfort and safety in the face of fear or threat. And I guess I was having a cup of tea today in a garden centre, and there's a little boy, maybe 2, toddling along, and he heard a dog bark and he ran back to mum and held onto her tight, and it's this idea that he could go back if there was fear or threat, and the fear was generated through the dog's bark. Secure base. The attachment figure acts as a base of security from which the child can explore the surrounding environment. And as I sat and had my tea, I watched this little child, go out, run amongst the tables and explore where he was, explore his environment, but he knew he could go back to the safety of mum and dad. He knew he could return. And finally, separation distress, anxiety in the child that occurs in the absence of an attachment figure. And we've all seen children who perhaps get separated from mum or dad or caregiver and get very, very upset, and they get quite anxious. And it kind of answers the question why anybody who's got a child, if they have to leave the room the child's in, will sing a song or talk to the child, because the child doesn't realise, very small children don't realise that once the parent is out of sight, that they're in another room. They have no conception of another room. So quite simply, if the parent or the caregivers can't be seen or heard, then they're gone. Simple as that. So you'll see parents, if you have to nip out of the living room into the kitchen to make a cup of tea, they'll be talking to the child or singing to the child, just so they know that the child knows that they're still there in a very real sense. Now we're going to have a look at the work of Mary Ainsworth. So we've looked at Bowlby and his ideas, which were evolutionary, and we're going to look at Mary Ainsworth. Now Mary Ainsworth was born in Ohio in 1913, and she died in Virginia. She was aged 85 in 1999. She was Canadian by nationality. Now this is a bit of a guess on my part, because I've never seen any conclusive evidence in my research that she changed her nationality, but she's always referred to as the Canadian psychologist. Her fields of psychology, she coined the term strange situation, and the key idea was attachment styles in children. So she developed the theory of attachment to bring in attachment styles, different forms of attachment. So this is where she's building on Bowlby's work. And actually she collaborated with Bowlby in the 1950s, who were part of a team that did a lot of research into child development and early childhood studies. So they came from the same position, if you like. It's just that Ainsworth's position was, we're going to look at it in a second, it was in fact attachment styles, different ways of attaching. So let's have a look at the theoretical differences. Bowlby came from the position that attachment was evolutionary, and it was hardwired. It was something that's hardwired into us. And those of us who've seen calves being born or lambs being born see that as soon as they're born, they go to suckle the mother. There's something almost magnetic between the mother and the child which connects them together, and it's just evolutionary. They just know how to do it. Children know how to suckle at a breast. It's evolutionary. It's built in. It builds on the work of Lorenz, Conrad Lorenz. So look him up. If you Google Lorenz and ducks, you'll find a whole host of information on his work. And you could say that it's the nature debate. So I've underlined it, and we'll come back to the nature-nurture debate in a second. Now Mary Ainsworth's work was a development of Bowlby's, and she called it situational. Now situational in this instance means that the child kind of makes a choice or has to adapt to the care that is being given by the parent. So it's learned behaviour. The child learns what care the parent will give them and what care won't be given to them. And that has an impact in adult life. As a counsellor, I've worked with lots of adults whose experience of being parented has impacted on them in later life. They've not been able to perhaps love other people or form relationships, but mainly they can't form a relationship with themselves. They can't find internal love. And it's nurture. Now I know in classes, especially in schools and colleges, that there's a lovely way of having it, the nature and nurture argument. What I'm going to try and do is bring them together to try and give you a sense that actually it's not just nurture, it's the two things coming together. And what I've done is I've done a developmental path. Now this is my own work. So I'm going to start with born. Babies are biologically wired for attachment to the caregiver, intrinsic need to seek comfort, reassurance, sustenance and safety in the world. That's Bowlby's idea, that children are biologically wired for it. It's a nature idea. The learn, which is the nurture idea, babies and toddlers learn from caregivers how much care, love and comfort they will receive. This forms the basis of their attachment to the caregiver. Now this is very much the work of Ainsworth. So she's now going on to see how parents' love and attachment styles alter the behaviour and the feelings of the child. And I put a new idea in called ADAPT, a new research in areas of neuroscience, that's a study of the brain, indicates in early childhood areas of our brain form the connections which allows us to be empathic with ourselves and others. Nature and nurture come together to form our view of ourselves and others. And there's some really, really interesting research, brain scans of children who've been in care in orphanages in Romania who haven't had any kind of love. And the forward part of their brain has been scanned and there's no neurological connections, because our brain forms throughout, certainly it could be argued throughout our life, but in terms of our emotional brain, forms through childhood into the teenage years. So we adapt, our brain adapts. In the 1970s, Mary Ainsworth carried out a number of child observations. They became known as the strange situation assessments. Her observational research formed that basis of what is known as attachment styles. So what she did was she observed children with parents with differing backgrounds, I guess, and she worked out by how the child reacted what attachment they had with the parent. And this research has been added to and is still considered relevant in the world of social work and child psychology today. So Ainsworth's strange situation assessment worked like this. The parent and the child are alone in the room and there's a hidden camera. The child explores the room without parental participation. So the child just potters around, has a look, explores. Then a stranger enters the room, talks to the parent and approaches the child. The parent quietly leaves the room, so the child and the stranger are in the same room. And then the parent returns and comforts the child. And it's the point where the parent leaves the room and the point where the parent returns and comforts the child that Ainsworth could make an assessment on how the child had attached to that parent. And I'll put in a video link in the bar below showing that kind of experiment filmed again. So finally we're going to look at types of attachment. Secure attachment is one that she identified. Ambivalent attachment. Avoidant or insecure attachment. And then one that came later, and it was identified by Main and Solomon, was called disorganised attachment. And in the next presentation I'm going to expand on types of attachment, and I'm going to give you some examples of how those show in adult life. For further information, if you're watching on Moodle, I'll put some links up and I'll download some documents that you can download in a zip file. Or if you're watching on YouTube, if you click the link below, in the bar below, what I will do is I'll put a whole host of links in to experiments that are done, or observational experiments with children, to give you an idea of how the strange situation research looks, and not only that, how it formed the opinions of Mary Ainsworth, who built on the ideas of John Bowlby. And finally, thank you for watching.